Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 13 quarterback rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're talking about all things related to the quarterback position, beginning with matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks thus far this season on average in a 4-point per passing touchdown format. After that, of course, we'll talk about my top 16 quarterback rankings. Again, rankings are subject to change. For those of you who are looking for a specific quarterback, you can go down in the description of the video and find timestamps down there. While you're in the description, make sure if you have not yet already, subscribe to the channel. We're making 2020 fantasy football content here on the daily. And for those of you who are trying to stay up to date, we are having a playoff primer video come out tomorrow, talking about players that are widely owned and can be picked up prior to your playoffs, so you don't have to fight over them via fab or waivers this upcoming Tuesday. So again, trying to just get yourself ready for the playoffs for those of you who are ready to make it. For those of you who have not yet clinched a spot, you can go ahead, of course, show up 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, kickoff with Kirchhoff. We live stream every Sunday morning, making sure your lineups are set with updated rankings, all that kind of jazz for those of you who are interested, of course. We also have extra stuff like the Discord server, link down in the description. We're talking all things fantasy football there. And for those of you who are trying to support the channel above and beyond, you can go over to the Patreon. The link is also in the description. Make sure you like today's video, of course. Really does help the channel out, and comment down below. I do appreciate it. Okay, let's get into this, shall we? Easily. Week 13 is probably the most important week. A lot of you will say, Andrew, this is a must-win. I 100% agree. Every week, in my opinion, is a must-win, but certainly Week 13, as this is the final week of the regular season for the fantasy football season until next year. This could be the final games that some of you guys end up participating in. So hopefully we can go ahead and clutch up some wins here and make sure that our lineups are ready. Of course, it all begins with the quarterback position, the top-down approach, the player that could be your solid rock or the reason you lose. So let's go ahead and let's name some players and talk about quarterbacks that could help you potentially win this upcoming week. We'll begin with matchups, talking about who has the most advantageous position in terms of who's playing against, some defenses that really just can't stop quarterbacks. Of course, the Seattle Seahawks, as the season has progressed, have continued to be the number one matchup for quarterbacks, giving up nearly 24, almost 25 points in a 4-point per passing touchdown format. That is a ridiculous number. But that being said, the quarterback position for the New York Giants is in a little bit of a flux. Is it going to be Daniel Jones? Is it going to be Colt McCoy? I don't really have much interest in investing in either. Perhaps maybe one of the or two of the pieces in that offense, maybe Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, or Dwayne Gallman, but I'm not too interested in rolling with one of those quarterbacks unless, of course, I am in a 2-quarterback league and I am struggling with the position. Outside of that, of course, the Atlanta Falcons give up a lot of points to the opposing quarterback position, giving up 2 touchdowns per game, 300-plus passing yards. Taysom Hill, we know that he is not the pure passer that a lot of people really anticipate a quarterback to be in comparison to a Drew Brees, specifically in that offense. And it has definitely hurt the pieces around him, but he still produced very well against them a couple weeks back in week, 11 or 10? He had 200-plus passing yards. He had himself, of course, his 2 rushing touchdowns, and that's kind of been his motto or his MO at this point. Just run the ball on the goal line and get him as many touches as you possibly can. He's had, I think, 10 rushing attempts each of the last 2 games. Of course, Atlanta, this is the second time they'll be playing them this season, so I think they'll be ready, but we'll talk about that on today's episode. Of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars giving a lot of points. Kirk Cousins has been on a hot streak as of late. This offense is really, kicking into high gear, trying to make the playoffs. Of course, Dalvin Cook's a little beat up, and they're trying to at least give him more resting opportunities, and Kirk Cousins definitely running away with it. I know they'll be missing Irv Smith this week, but that only opens up more opportunity for Kyle Rudolph, like we talked about yesterday. And of course, that offense, with Adam Thielen coming back, should be great. The New York Jets obviously giving up a lot of points. Derek Carr perhaps had the worst performance of his entire career this past week. And of course, this upcoming week will not have Josh Jacobs in the backfield. They're still dealing with a couple injuries at the wide receiver position with Nelson Aguilar. Hopefully, there'll be a full go because there's a potential that Derek Carr, without a running game, I know Devontae Booker will be back there. Maybe they go ahead and lean in on passing the ball and letting Derek Carr lead them to the promised land this week. The Tennessee Titans, of course, giving up a lot. Baker Mayfield at quarterback, not really something I'm interested in, as that team is pretty much a run-first team with 2 of the best backs in the NFL. So again, as long as Nick Chubb is on the field, I'm not 100% certain that Baker can be relied upon every single week, even in a fantastic matchup as such. Nick Mullins playing against the Buffalo Bills. We have Mitch Trubisky versus the Detroit Lions. He is the thumbnail for a reason. We'll talk about him in a bit. Again, the Lions, they're giving up 2 passing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks thus far this season. And Mitch Trubisky has had himself a pretty good history against that Lions defense. And I think they could probably end up putting up another good number against them this week. The Chargers versus Cam. Sam Darnold versus the Raiders, and then, of course, Ryan Tannehill playing against the Cleveland Browns. Those are the best matchups at the quarterback position to give you a little bit more perspective as some of the tougher matchups this upcoming week. course, it shouldn't be a surprise. The Los Angeles Rams have really stopped a lot of quarterbacks, only giving up one passing touchdown. I mean, Nick Mullins is another one of those examples. Like last week, he didn't get anything done through the air, and they tried to stop him as much as possible. Of course, that, the Rams offense didn't do them any favors, but, Kyler Murray comes into town. Can he turn, these terrible performances that he's been putting out as of late into something that we can at least be proud of? A 20-point game. We can't rely upon a 7 or 8-point game on a weekly basis. And with him not running the ball as much, getting those rushing touchdowns that are going in the direction of Kenny Drake, what are we going to see this week? Of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers shutting down Alex Smith is probably the most likely thing to happen. The Indianapolis Colts playing against Deshaun Watson. Of course, Deshaun Watson's played better in the last couple of weeks, but without Will Fuller, how is he going to react, especially against a great secondary? The New York Giants, of course, their defense has been playing great this season with all the acquisitions they made during the offseason in terms of free agency and the draft. They brought in a lot of talent, and can Russell Wilson, who has been a little bit slowed down, it can Kyler Murray as of late, can they end up putting up a good performance? Anyway, so those are some of the tougher matchups at the quarterback position. Now that we've covered that, we can go ahead and move on to our top 16 quarterback rankings on the week. Beginning off with our number one, we have ourselves Patrick Mahomes. So again, Patrick Mahomes has been on an absolute tear as of the last 4 games. He has thrown for 14 passing touchdowns, and he's coming off of a performance of 462 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And for however much pressure they set in his direction, he was still able to make plays by extending plays with his legs, getting himself 28 rushing yards, and being able to find open receivers by buying himself time. That's the thing that Patrick Mahomes has done more and more as of the last 2 seasons, making plays with his legs and extending plays. To be honest, the Denver Broncos stand no chance. I know in week 7 when they played against the Denver Broncos, Patrick Mahomes only had 200 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown, but that was just a matter of circumstance. The defense was getting interceptions, scoring touchdowns, and of course the running game was, used to kill out the clock. And in the fourth quarter, Patrick Mahomes was pulled out of the game. So again, Patrick Mahomes, this could be a blowout, but I honestly think that they're going to get there via passing the ball. With Clyde Edwards potentially missing this week with an illness, it honestly seems like this is a game where they're going to throw the ball heavily, just like they did against the Jets, right? You could just throw the ball, score 3 touchdowns, mount the lead, then go ahead and run in the second half. I think that's what we're going to see this week. Patrick Mahomes is the number 1. We move on to our number 2, another great quarterback that has been on a hot streak. It is Aaron Rodgers. So a couple of stats that I wanted to mention. Of course, Aaron Rodgers is coming off of a game against Chicago, 211 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. His offensive line played fantastic. They added a weapon this week with Tavon Austin. I don't know how much, of a difference that's going to make in comparison. I mean, let's be honest. The main weapons in this offense as of late, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, Robert Tonyan. Those are the guys that are scoring touchdowns and making the biggest difference as of right now. Of course, you have the support players like a Jamal Williams and a Lazard or an MVS, but I'm not 100% certain that bringing in Tavon Austin 100% makes it a better situation. I think they're already in a good spot. And playing against Philadelphia, you're pretty advantageous position there. I know, Philadelphia hasn't given up a lot of touchdowns to quarterbacks as of late. That's just mainly because they've played in relatively easy matchups. So they really haven't been tested in that sense. But Aaron Rodgers, like I've mentioned, he has been on a hot streak. He's had 6 consecutive games of 3+ touchdowns. On top of that, in 9 of his games just this season, he's had himself 3+ touchdowns. And in 5 of those contests, it's 4+ touchdowns. He's unbelievable. I cannot believe how well Aaron Rodgers has played this season in comparison to how he looked last year. He looked lost last year. Obviously, he was dealing with a couple of injuries, but I mean, the difference between Aaron Rodgers last year and MVP Aaron Rodgers right now is unbelievable. He's got a great matchup. I'm excited about his potential against Philadelphia this week. Our number 3 is Justin Herbert. Now, I thought about this for a while. To be honest, Justin Herbert, yes, he's a rookie quarterback. Bill Belichick has a pretty good track record against rookie quarterbacks, but Justin Herbert is a different animal. He's coming off of a game. Of course, he played against the Buffalo Bills, another division rival of the New England Patriots, and they're going to be watching that film very closely as they play him very soon. But as of right now, I mean, what can we expect from Justin Herbert? This is a guy that is throwing 300+ yards on a weekly basis. He's getting himself multiple touchdowns. Even though this last week only had 1 passing touchdown, I think that number could easily increase. I mean, yes, New England secondary, that is the biggest concern. Stephon Gilmore, Devin McCourty, Bill Belichick's mind. Can you go ahead and take advantage and force his rookie quarterback to make mistakes? But to be honest, just in the last couple weeks, we've seen quarterbacks produce well against the secondary, and maybe Bill Belichick's defense is not where he wants it to be going forward. Lamar Jackson, 249 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns against them. Deshaun Watson had 344 passing yards, had himself 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown, being able to move his legs out of the pocket. Again, that is a thing that, of course, Lamar Jackson was capable of doing, and Justin Herbert has the ability to do as well. As of right now, I mean, even when I look back at last week's matchup against Kyler Murray, I went and I watched that game over again. Kyler Murray had 3 or 4 opportunities of scoring passing touchdowns in that game. Either penalties occurred, got him down to the goal line, and then they handed off to Kenyon Drake. He could have easily pulled that ball and ran in. Kyler Murray, even though he didn't have the greatest performance, and at his expense, Kenyon Drake had the best day of his season. It's just unfortunate that that was the circumstance, but it is what it is. And I honestly think that, Justin Herbert, even with the offense that surrounds him and the potential difficulty of this defense, he's got a lot of, playmakers around him to come in and help him out. As long as the offensive line is playing as well as they have this season, they should be able to run the ball pretty easily and set him up for success. He's my number 3. We have Ryan Tannehill as our number 4. I've been waiting for this last stretch, week 13 through 16, for Ryan Tannehill for a while. This is pretty much why I've had Ryan Tannehill around majority of my rosters. Of course, early in the season, he was great. I mean, he's had a lot of great performances. In 9 of his games this season alone, he has had 2+ touchdowns. And again, he's playing against the Cleveland Browns this week. Just this past week, the Cleveland Browns let Mike Glennon do pretty much whatever he wanted. He had over 200 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. So again, if the Cleveland Browns defense isn't able to start Mike Glennon and their number 1 cornerback, Denzel Ward, is going to be out this upcoming week, it just seems to me that Ryan Tannehill is in a very advantageous position with, of course, Corey Davis and A.J. Brown out there. Derrick Henry lighting it up on the ground. They're going to be in a lot of red zone opportunities. Of course, Jonnu Smith's going to be out, but they have a lot of other tight ends that could step up and make plays. So again, when you could go ahead and you walk into Indianapolis and play on their field and play as well as they had last week with Ryan Tannehill scoring 2 touchdowns, I think this upcoming week against Cleveland should be a cakewalk and they should be able to dominate. He's my number 4. Our number 5 for this week is Russell Wilson. Again, Russell Wilson has kind of slowed down, and I'm going to anticipate that he probably will continue to slow down and not have those 4 or 5 passing touchdown performances with the 300, 400 yards. That's not in the realm of possibility as of right now because, again, the New York Giants have a good defense. Now, the reason why I think Russell Wilson can continue to have good weeks and at least give you viable points in terms of fantasy production at the quarterback position is based on what the quarterback play of the New York Giants is going to look like this week. If it's Colt McCoy, to be honest, I have a hard time thinking that Colt McCoy can very easily pass the ball and move the ball on this Seattle Seahawks defense. I actually anticipate the Seattle Seahawks defense for the next 2 weeks playing against the Giants and Jets to be one of the better defenses, causing a lot of turnovers and causing a lot of havoc as that defense has gotten healthy and have gotten their players back. So especially in the secondary with Griffin coming back and Jamal Adams. So to be honest, I think Russell Wilson will have more opportunities because of the New York Giants offense kind of stuttering early and not being able to move the ball. That should give him more opportunities with a healthy Chris Carson, of course, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and we're getting more and more usage out of Jacob Hollister at the tight end position. We could end up seeing a pretty good performance here. I know, Josh Gordon was activated or is eligible to come back soon. I mean, I don't think that really poses much extra value. He's not playing this week, but I mean, in the future, it's all going to be DK and Lockett. So either way, just wanted to mention that. Here we go. Moving on to our number 6, we have Josh Allen as our number 6 quarterback playing against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, my only concern with Josh Allen is, of course, he plays against a tough defense. Even though this defense is going to be missing a couple secondary members, a couple outside linebackers, defensive linemen, as they've lost over the last couple weeks, they still have a pretty tight core of, pretty good defenders. I mean, there's a reason why they were able to compete and beat the Los Angeles Rams last week. I mean, Jared Goff is an absolute clown, but that's a different conversation on its own. Josh Allen is coming off of a performance against the Los Angeles Chargers in which it should have been one of the easier ones at the quarterback position, in which he only had 157 passing yards. I mean, when a guy like Stephon Diggs isn't able to have big yardage counts and is only catching, 7 catches for 39 yards, that's not going to be good enough for him. I know Gabriel Davis got some, utilization, but Cole Beasley was the one that complete that passing touchdown. So again, I think if everything balances itself out this upcoming week, we should see some more usage from Josh Allen in the passing game, being able to compete with this offense. Again, the 49ers should be able to run right through Josh Allen's defense in the Buffalo Bills, not really being great at stopping the run. And that is going to force him to have to continue to keep the pedal on the metal, keep scoring. Of course, he has the ability to run the ball, had himself 32 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown last week. That's a 9-point influx of points in which a lot of other quarterbacks don't have the ability to get. So as long as he's continuing to pass the ball as much as he has this season and continuing to turn it up, I think he'll be just fine this week against the 49ers. We have number 7, Kyler Murray. So I don't know if Kyler Murray's healthy at this moment, but again, the Rams, they give up the fewest points to opposing quarterbacks. On top of it, Kyler Murray has not been healthy with a shoulder injury. On top of that, you got Ramsey on the other side, and he's going to be taking a lot of pressure from Aaron Donald. I mean, if Aaron Donald's getting after Michael Brockers, this is a defensive line that is going to, pretty much bring pressure the entire time. So it's going to be up to him. If he perhaps can run out of the pocket and make plays with his legs, then he's going to give himself some value. And that's what I'm hoping we're going to see. Hopefully we'll have Aaron Donald forcing Kyler Murray to not just sit back in the pocket and just throw the ball, but at least forcing him to run with his legs and get extra points in terms of fantasy value. Perhaps pressure could go ahead and in turn give us that extra value, but we're not 100% guaranteed that at this current moment. Kyler Murray, again, is coming off of a week in which he didn't have a touchdown. Again, like I mentioned when I talked about it with Justin Herbert, he had easily 3 opportunities of scoring touchdowns in that game when I watched it back. And to be honest, I'm not too worried about it. I think he'll be able to bounce back this week, have himself a solid performance as my number 7 quarterback. Number 8 is Deshaun Watson. Again, he's playing against the Indianapolis Colts. That Colts defense is tough. But, Deshaun Watson's played against tough defenses just recently. I mean, he played against the New England Patriots, had himself 2 passing touchdowns, 344 yards, and a rushing touchdown, in which, of course, he was able to move out of the pocket and just dominate with his legs. Of course, losing Will Fuller is going to be the biggest difference maker, as that is a complete game changer in terms of that offense. Just this past week on Thursday, the Thanksgiving game against the Detroit Lions, there's a reason why Deshaun Watson had 318 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns. It's because Will Fuller had himself over 102 touchdowns, and that is that's going to be the biggest difference. Is Kiki Cutie going to be able to step up? Are the tight ends for this team going to be able to step up and give him extra targets to be able to feast against this defense? Of course, we know Ryan Tannehill is coming off of a game of 221 passing yards, 2 touchdowns against that defense. Aaron Rodgers a couple weeks back, 311 and 3 against Indianapolis' defense. If Indianapolis does not have their core players, a couple of players are going to be missing due to injury, there is a potential that Deshaun Watson could put up a pretty good game here. I'm anticipating him to do so. He's my number 8. Number 9 is Kirk Cousins. Again, playing against Jacksonville is probably the best thing that could possibly happen to any quarterback that you have on roster. To be honest, Kirk Cousins has had 3 passing touchdowns in 3 out of the last 4 games. He's coming off of a performance in which he didn't even have Adam Thielen. He had himself 307 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and beat the Carolina Panthers after being down 11 points in the 4th quarter. A great comeback victory. So now that you get Adam Thielen back and you play against a defense that really just cannot stop wide receivers or tight ends, it just seems to, or even running backs at the matter, it just seems to me like this offense is going to continue to stay on that, that hot streak. If he's going to continue to pass for, 3+ passing touchdowns every single week, he's just a guy that is going to continue to give himself extra value. When we're talking about 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, in a 4-point per passing touchdown format, that's 24 points. You're not going to be able to pass up on that every single week. So I'll take that. And that is why Kirk Cousins has moved himself into the top 10 conversation as our number 9. Moving on to our number 10, we have ourselves Taysom Hill. So here's the thing. Taysom Hill has been pretty solid in terms of being able to get fantasy points based on his rushing ability. He's had 10 rushing attempts each of the last 2 games. In those 2 games, he has at least put up a minimum of 44 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. That in itself is a 16.4 point swing. Just getting it off of the rushing game. Now, of course, he's accompanied these performances with a couple, one bad game and 1 decent game, right? Playing against the Atlanta Falcons, he did not pass for a passing touchdown, but he still was able to have a pretty good passing completion percentage and over 230 passing yards. Great numbers, that's fine. Against the Denver Broncos, he even came out and said, our team wasn't looking to win the game. We were just looking not to lose the game against the Denver Broncos, so they didn't really give me many opportunities to throw the ball. Hopefully this upcoming week, playing against the Atlanta Falcons, a defense that gives up the 2nd most points to opposing quarterbacks, and the defense that they've played just recently, they'll continue to key in on the matchup, be able to get Michael Thomas more implemented. Hopefully, we're going to see Alvin Kamara get implemented. I don't think they even need Alvin Kamara to win these games anymore. They're just going to run the ball with Taysom Hill, feed the ball down the field to Michael Thomas, and hopefully find value there. Again, what if in fact Taysom Hill doesn't score these touchdowns, then he becomes a Cam Newton, and that in itself is a problem. Because again, Cam Newton, who doesn't score rushing touchdowns, is not the same quarterback and isn't a guy to be trusted. So Taysom Hill could easily turn into that in the coming weeks. We have Ryan Fitzpatrick as our number 11. So, again, if Ryan Fitzpatrick is given the starting spot, which I'm anticipating him to do so because, again, Tua has been questionable all week with a thumb injury. He's playing against Cincinnati. Again, Cincinnati, not one of the better defenses in the National Football League. I was 100% ready to start Daniel Jones against them last week. Of course, Daniel Jones gets injured and didn't really have the greatest performance based on having to leave middle of the third quarter. But again, Ryan Fitzpatrick coming off a performance of 257 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. I mentioned this earlier in the week in terms of the waiver wire segment. From weeks 2 through 6, prior to getting benched, Ryan Fitzpatrick was the number 6 overall fantasy quarterback with Devontae Parker out in the lineup, with Mike Gesicki out there, potentially the return of Myles Gaskin. I honestly think that Ryan Fitzpatrick is a fantastic play and a pickup and play as a streaming option this upcoming week. We have Ben Roethlisberger as our number 12. Again, Big Ben he's been pretty consistent all season long. Of course, this Wednesday game was off for everybody. I mean, when Deontay Johnson's dropping touchdowns and, all this kind of jazz is happening. A Wednesday, afternoon game, I really didn't anticipate it to be that bad, but I mean, I guess you just can't rely on players to just, have a game in the middle of the week when they're typically having their first practice in full pads in the week on a Wednesday. But either way, they play against Washington this upcoming, Monday or Tuesday. The thing about Ben Roethlisberger, his consistency has been there. In 9 of the games that he has played this season, he has had 2+ touchdowns. That is what I continue to bank on, getting himself upwards of 250 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and being able to just be a solid floor of play. That's what I'm anticipating, and that's why I continue to have him in the top 12 conversation, because, again, he has a lot of weapons surrounding him, whether it's Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Eric Ebron, and whatever running back they have behind him, they're going to continue to perform. Mitchell Trubisky is the thumbnail for a reason, and I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb, and I'm going to say Mitchell Trubisky is this week's number 13 quarterback because, again, he has a fantastic matchup against Detroit. In the last 3 contests that he's played against Detroit, let's go back to week 1 of this season, 242 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. That's a great game. Last season, 2019, against Detroit, has had 6 passing touchdowns and 511 passing yards. So, again, in the last 3 contests, he's averaging 3 passing touchdowns against them. On top of the fact that this past week, even though it was a lot of garbage time, he was still able to find himself some confidence in the second half of that game, get himself more involved, more chemistry with this offense that he hasn't started with since, week 3 against the Falcons. So again, he's building himself more and more confidence with this team, getting himself more, implemented with Darnell Mooney, with Anthony Miller once again, and Allen Robinson, which he's already played with in his career. But again, if he's going to go ahead and be given the ability to just run with this offense, in a good matchup against the team that he has typically played well against, I'm 100% ready to go ahead and start Mitchell Trubisky in week 13. We have Lamar Jackson as number 14. Now, if Lamar Jackson is cleared to play, I think there's one of 2 trains of thought in my mind. Lamar Jackson is a running quarterback. In 8 out of the last 9 contests, he's had a minimum of 50 rushing yards. So again, he is always getting 50 rushing yards. That's 5 points on the ground. Accompanied with a touchdown, you can end up an 11-point swing there. But he hasn't really had too many rushing touchdowns. Now, my only concern is, yes, they play against Dallas. Dallas is not a great team. Through the air, Big Ben a couple weeks back, 303, 300 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns. And even Kirk Cousins had 300 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns against them. But the way to beat Dallas is running the ball. Antonio Gibson proved that, 115 yards on the ground, 3 rushing touchdowns. Dalvin Cook, 115, 1 rushing touchdown, while 45 through the air. Kenny Drake, 164 on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns. So again, running backs dominate against this team. I think with Dobbins being activated today, it kind of, I think, diminishes the value of Lamar Jackson because he's not going to have Mark Andrews potentially out there. And he doesn't like to pass the ball to Marquise Brown. And that in itself scares me. Unless he's running the ball a lot, he's not going to get a lot of value this week. And that is why I moved him to 14. Again, I don't even know if he's playing. Carson Wentz is our number 15. And you may be thinking Carson Wentz is a horrible quarterback. And I agree. But to be honest, I think it's because of Doug Peterson really not giving him the opportunity to flourish in this offense. Of course, he's coming off a performance on Monday night against the Seahawks, 215 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 42 rushing yards. Those 42 rushing yards are the biggest difference. I mean, if you guys haven't really noticed, as of right now, Carson Wentz is a top 12 quarterback in a fantasy format because he has a lot of rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. I mean, just a stat to kind of throw out. In 8 of the last 9 games that he's played this season, he has 2+ touchdowns. I mean, that is the exact number that I think Ben Roethlisberger has been putting up in terms of consistency as of late. So he is on pace with that, even though he turns over the ball a lot more. The biggest difference maker is he's still scoring points. So if you're playing a league that's not really penalizing you for interceptions, maybe -1 per interception, he's still a pretty good option. Playing against Green Bay, the way that Green Bay played in the second half against Trubisky, giving him all that opportunity to just roam freely and to score a bunch of points. Seems like Carson Wentz may be given the equal opportunity and find himself fantasy relevant as a garbage time play. The last option that I wanted to mention is Derek Carr. Again, Derek Carr plays against the Jets. The Jets are, the fourth easiest matchup at the quarterback position. Fitzpatrick, a couple weeks back, 257-2 against them. Justin Herbert, 366-3. Cam Newton, 274-2. And Patrick Mahomes, 416-5. And then Fitzpatrick, again, had himself 191-3. Everyone dominates against the Jets through the air. Derek Carr, please get it done. Redeem yourself. Now, he sits at 16 because, again, I'm afraid. And again, without Josh Jacobs, what if this offense, struggles? There's a possibility of that. But I'm hoping that's not going to be the case. I'm hoping we're going to get a bounce back here from Derek Carr. Should be able to find Darren Waller, maybe Henry Ruggs this week, and be a valuable quarterback. Those are my top 16 quarterbacks on the week. Again, thank you everybody for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Click the like button down below. Tomorrow we'll be talking about some playoff positions and players that go after. Again, thank you everybody, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.